comes in and basically starts the dumbest trade war in the history of this country. This is going to be about potentially millions of people losing their jobs. It's going to be about millions of people losing their savings, many of people losing their retirement security, and at the same time taking on even higher costs for everything they buy. So that's going to push us in potentially to foreclosures or people being pushed out of their apartments.
A few moments later.
This is CNN Breaking News.
And the breaking news this morning, a major breakthrough in the trade war between the United States and China. The two sides making a surprise announcement after a weekend of talks in Switzerland under the agreement unveiled by the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent. For 90 days, the U.S. is going to cut its tariffs on Chinese goods from 145% down to 30%. And China will cut its levies on U.S. imports from 125% to 10%. During these 90 days, then, the countries say that the negotiations continue. Globally, markets are cheering the news. U.S. stock futures, we'll take a look at that, way up ahead of the opening bell on Wall Street after weeks of wild volatility that we've all been experiencing and covering over President Trump's tariffs, which have disrupted supply chains and raised recession fears. President Trump will likely be asked about all of this when he signs an executive order later this morning that he says will be to lower prescription drug prices. Let's get over to the White House right now. CNN's Elena Treen is standing by. Break all of this down for us right now as we know it so far, Elena.
Okay, I mean, this is a major breakthrough between the United States and China following these talks in Geneva this weekend. The Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, announced in a 3 a.m. press conference that both countries have agreed to dramatically scale back these tariffs for at least 90 days. Now, we're expected to see these tariffs be rolled back starting May 14th. That's just 2 days from now. And I want to reiterate how you laid this out. So essentially, the United States is going to temporarily lower its overall tariffs on Chinese goods from 145% to 30%, while China is going to roll back its tariffs on American imports from 125% to 10%. And
Boy, I gotta tell you guys, the Democrat Party and the mainstream liberal media, they're about to be high as hell off of copium today because the markets are surging off of the news that the president has announced when it comes to a breakthrough with China, when it comes to trade. And we're going to talk about the details. We talked about this yesterday a little bit when they first announced that, hey, yeah, we've made significant progress when it comes to the talks with China. Now we're getting the details, okay? But before we get into the details, I just want you guys to understand that the mainstream liberal media, they're going to spin this and try to say, well, Trump folded, right? Because it's damned if you do, damned if you don't at this point, okay? President Trump putting the tariffs on China, okay, essentially putting an embargo on the country. These people boo-hoo on and cry, oh, the dollar's going to collapse, massive inflation, empty shelves, right? None of these things happened, okay? They also claimed that because of President Trump's tariffs, nobody wants to negotiate with the United States of America. He's not going to get any trade deals. In fact, our allies are going to go to China, right? They're going to coalesce around China, and that China has more leverage. China is stronger than President Trump, and that they don't need to talk at all, right? They're not coming to the table at all to talk about this. But China did, in fact, come to the table, right? And again, there is an agreement to work out the trade issues moving into the future. Now, again, I'm going to talk about the details, but I just want you guys to remember what these people said. Not only did we get a deal with the UK, which again proves that our partners are willing to negotiate with us and to do deals. But again, we also got China to the table, which means that no matter what these people say, I don't care what these people say, this is a W for Trump.
The trade, honestly, the trade is asymmetrical.
And who voted for Donald Trump?
Precisely. Trade is asymmetrical with China. We imported over 439 billion products from China. We exported over 140 billion from China. Their own foreign ministry has said, we will not flinch. We will not genuflect to a bullying government. I respectfully disagree.
You, though, Tiffany, that we rely so much on an adversary to make most of our goods?
Listen, whether it bothers me or not is irrelevant. I'm dealing with reality.
It's important, though.
It is important, but this is what it is.
Why does it have to be the reality that we
are dependent on so many things to come out of
Because
our
if-
biggest adversary in
Yes,
the world. They are the enemy, and we should not be dependent on them.
But
for
no, they
anything.
are not our enemy. They're our biggest trading partner. And if we
They've got
manufacture,
rare earth minerals and you
Right.
don't.
Scott Bessent today under oath said we're currently negotiating with 16 of the 17 most important countries, and he'll be meeting with the Chinese this weekend when they all converge in Switzerland. I think dealing with, I'm sorry, with all due respect to all these other countries making deals, they're small and relatively unimportant. We're the big player in the field, and everybody knows it, and people would rather do business with us than do business with China because of what Jim just said. They have all these strategies to inflict pain upon you if you don't bend to their will or allow them to break the rules. And so I think when you're dealing with the United States, it's going to take a little bit of time to work out the best deal for us and the best deal for them. But I have a lot of confidence that when push comes to shove and people get right down to it, an alliance, a trading partnership, business dealings with the United States is a heck of a lot better than being reliant on the Chinese because they have seen what they have done to us and everybody else in the world. The decoupling and the isolation of China is a real thing, and, it may be a little painful, but it's necessary.
I think
Most significant country.
No,
We are the
Scott,
world's
stop with the
superpower.
jingoism.
We are the world's
let me
superpower.
stop with the jingoism.
Dealing with us is the most important thing.
Stop,
any of them can do.
stop. Do you think that China can do just as well with the EU? Do you think that China can do just as well with India?
If I were the EU, I would not want to be reliant. And look what's happened to us. They don't want it.
It's not a question of reliance. It's a question on the fact that everybody is cutting deals with each other. We're not cutting deals with anybody.
We have one thing in the news tonight.
No.
You guys keep saying
They're having discussions with each other.
We're in the middle of talking to 16 countries, according to the Treasury
Scott,
Secretary.
According to the Treasury Secretary, we've been hearing from them for over a month that we're on the cusp any day now.
You're saying
Any
he's
day.
lying?
No, I'm saying that I've been
He's
hearing.
under oath today.
I'm saying that every deal that we heard about is coming any day now, any day now.
How
any day
quickly
now.
would you be able to cut a trade
How
deal?
quick?
I wonder
I
how
wouldn't.
sustainable.
No, let me answer you that question. I wouldn't get
I
into
think
this
that's
mess in the first place.
I
Scott.
think that's a
the
very good.
You wouldn't try to improve our trading
No.
relationship?
I would not get into this.
Scott.
Good to know.
Yeah, so again, I cannot stress to you guys enough that these people would rather see America lose than for President Trump to win. They're totally fine with China winning, okay, if Trump doesn't win. That is where the Democrat Party's at. That is where the liberals are at this point. Because I'm telling you, everything that they said was what they wanted to happen, right? Because they knew that all these things happen, right? If massive inflation happened, if empty shelves happened, if the stock market collapsed, all these things will hurt President Trump. And they kept wishing for it to happen, even though it never happened, right? That's the crazy part about it, because they told us just the talk of tariffs is inflationary, right? They kept talking about the consumer sentiment surveys, how everybody's expecting inflation. Well, turns out that in reality, just because a Republican is in office and you keep telling everybody there's going to be inflation, that doesn't mean that there's going to be inflation, right? Again, inflation is the lowest that it's been since President Trump left office in 2021, right? So, I mean, again, the inflation is declining, or the growth rate of inflation is declining, okay? But when a Democrat is in office, what did the mainstream liberal media tell us? Oh, well, no, inflation is a figment of your imagination. No, the economy is incredible, right? That inflation is transitory. Well, it turns out that telling people that inflation is not happening, okay, doesn't mean that inflation won't happen. Again, the media, what they're trying to do, I'm trying to tell you guys, they're trying to manufacture their own reality. And that's essentially what happened in this trade war, right? That's exactly what happened, okay? And the reality that they tried to manufacture just didn't happen. They kept trying to tell everybody that, oh, no, nobody wants to negotiate with the United States of America. Trump has permanently ruined American relations abroad, right? Nobody wants to do business with us. Meanwhile, we're cutting trade deals. We're still talking to people. And China, they come to the table. But I thought China was so strong that they're not going to come to the table unless Trump drops all the tariffs. Well, that didn't happen. I thought the stock market and the dollar was going to collapse. Nobody wants to invest in the United States of America, but yet over the past day, right, today, the market's up 2.6% in the S&P 500. The NASDAQ is up 3.62%, right? So if you look at over a year's time, the S&P is up 11.27%. The NASDAQ is up 13.36%. Wait, I thought that people had lost all their retirement savings. I thought that trillions of dollars were wiped out of the market. Trillions gold evaporated. What happened to all that? What happened? It's almost as if these people were lying. That these people weren't telling you what was happening. They were telling you what they wanted to happen. Now, what was I telling you guys the whole time? I kept telling you, I was like, yeah, China's going to come to the table. They have to. Their economy is struggling. They have mass unemployment. Factories are shutting down. There are protests. There are riots. There are things happening in China that the mainstream liberal media doesn't want to tell you, because if they tell you the truth about what's happening, they don't make it look good for Trump. We already know that these people covered up Biden's mental decline because they didn't want to help Trump. So you don't think they lie about the economy because they don't want to help Trump? This is why almost everything they say, I'm almost like, yeah, I just don't believe it, right? I believe the exact opposite, because at this point, their analysis and what they're saying is not grounded in reality. It is grounded in Trump derangement. And people like myself who are not Trump deranged, I kept telling you guys, I was like, yeah, there are signs that China is folding, that they're going to come to the table. They're going to have to come to the table, which again, that was the whole point. The whole point was to get China to the table. They came to the table. So you can't say that Trump lost when he got China to the table. But I kept telling you guys, I was like, yeah, China, they're erasing their statistics from public databases so people can't see how bad their economy is doing. Okay, there's mass unemployment. Okay, factories are shutting down. There are protests and riots. There are things happening in China that suggest that, yeah, this is not going well for them, right? That they're hurting from this, okay? But we were never told this side of the story by the mainstream liberal media because they didn't want people to know that part of it, right? It would actually make it look like President Trump's tariffs are hurting other countries besides the United States of America, right? According to these people and their liberal economics, tariffs only hurt the countries that put the tariffs in place, right? Every other country is never hurt, right? Even though they all have tariffs in place against us, but for whatever reason, nobody ever talks about how bad it is for their economy to be tariffing other folks, but it's only bad when we do it, right? Again, it's just, these people are basically engaging in treason, right? I mean, that's what's happening. They're rooting against this country because they hate Trump. So with that being said, let's react to Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent talk about some of the details of the negotiations that they had over the weekend with China.
Joining us now from Geneva, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. Mr. Secretary, thanks so much for joining us this morning. We appreciate it.
Joe, good to be with you.
Good. Checking on the delay, not too bad. We know that some of the details of what happened, Mr. Secretary, but can you recount to us some of the color, how it came together? You mentioned that the venue and the equanimity. Was it cordial and conciliatory right from the outset, or would you characterize it as tough negotiating most of the way?
Joe, I would characterize it very much as President Trump, the equivalent of President Trump's relationship with Party Chairman Xi. They have a good relationship, but they both advocate strongly for their respective countries, for their respective citizens. So it was always respectful. We have the two largest economies in the world. We were firm and we moved forward. We tried to identify shared interest. We came with a list of problems that we were trying to solve. And I think we did a good job on that. And again, this is a 90-day pause. For our tariff program, we had a plan, we had a process, and now what we have with the Chinese is a mechanism to avoid an upward tariff pressure like we did last time. So this is a 90-day pause.
Do you expect that tone to continue as these details, the devil's always in the details, get worked out over the next 90 days? And what aspects do you think will be relatively easy, and what will present the biggest obstacles?
Well, look, Joe, I don't think anything's going to be easy because this has been going on a long time. But what I can tell you, President Trump in his first term realized a very effective trade deal that was signed in the Oval Office in January 2020. And the Chinese delegation basically messaged to us that the Biden administration failed to hold them accountable for it. So I think that the January 2020, President Trump's highly successful previous trade deal can be a starting point. And knowing that President Trump will enforce any deal, I think will make the Chinese very deliberate in their negotiations and know that whatever they agree to, President Trump will enforce.
Ding, 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 ding. Ding, 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 ding. That's the part about this that the mainstream liberal media, they're not going to acknowledge. The Democrats aren't going to acknowledge. And again, this low-key could be the plan for China, right? This could be part of the reason why they came to the table, outside of the fact that, again, their country is hurting. But they could be looking at this like, okay, well, when a Democrat is in office, we don't really have to abide by these trade deals, right? We could just cheat and not really live up to our commitments, okay? However, with President Trump in office, they know, because of the fact that we effectively put an embargo on their country for a month, right? They know that, okay, this is serious, right? That, hey, the United States will do this, that they will enforce, or that they're willing to, at the very least, inflict pain in order to enforce the trade deals, right? In order for China to fulfill their obligations. So that in and of itself is a win. And I think that's why the administration is framing this as a deal, because they already had a deal in place. It's just that Biden didn't enforce it. So now that you're basically already coming to the table with a deal that both parties agreed to 4 or 5 years ago, you're in a kind of a place where you're not that far apart, right? When it comes to the negotiations and what you really want, right? You're not that far apart. So again, I think that's why they're framing this as a deal, okay? Even though they're going to continue to talk, because the framework for the deal is already in place. It's just that China never lived up to it. Now we're going to have more leverage, and we're going to get better terms because China knows that we will enforce it, right? And we've slapped these tariffs on them, and we've essentially tried to turn the world against them. So they know that, all right, well, you know what? It's probably best for us to play ball. Now, again, their game plan is probably to wait out Trump, right? To push more propaganda to DNC, MSCCP, and the Chinese news network in order to try to hurt the Republican Party, okay, to hurt MAGA. And that way, you know, maybe they try to affect our elections and get AOC in office or something. I don't know, right? But what I do know is the fact that they have come to the table, that they are negotiating, and that is what President Trump wanted in the first place, right? From the beginning, they said that, hey, it's up to China in regards to whether or not these tariffs come off, okay? But obviously, they want to use the tariffs to incentivize companies to leave China, okay, to come back to the United States of America, or to go to one of our partner countries and manufacture there, right? Because what we don't want is that we don't want China essentially dominating the world when it comes to manufacturing and putting the world's manufacturing businesses out of business due to the fact that nobody can compete with them due to their unfair practices, right? So there are a lot of incentives for the world to gang up on China, but that's not what we heard from the media, right? It's not what we heard from the media at all. China knows this. Again, Reuters reported that, yeah, part of the reason why they're coming to the table is because they feel like the world is turning against them, right? And they're afraid. They don't want that to happen. But again, you didn't hear that in the mainstream liberal media. This is why I'm not surprised they came to the table, okay? But it's damned if you do, damned if you don't with these people. Trump puts the tariffs on. Oh, it's terrible. The dollar's going to collapse. The markets are collapsing. Everybody's losing their retirement. Empty shelves. Mass inflation, right? But now he is bringing down the tariffs, not completely dropping the tariffs, still leaving them in place, and these people are still mad and upset while the market is surging. Wait, the market surging basically says that, hey, the market feels good about this deal, right? The markets are saying, yeah, well, what President Trump is doing with China is good. They just spent the last month telling us how we should care about what the market is doing, because the market is a reflection of the economy. Now, all of a sudden, they're not talking about the market anymore, right? Ain't it amazing how that works? Absolutely amazing.
Would you say that the Chinese, were you able to detect, or was it apparent that there was some urgency to make some progress, given what we're hearing about Chinese businesses being shuttered en masse, factory activity declining, PMI declining, maybe even some social unrest? Could you detect that, or was there, for lack of a better term, a stiff upper lip shown to you?
Look, the vice premier is a very skilled negotiator. He is a high-ranking Chinese official. I had a very good economic briefing beforehand, but there was no sense of anxiety. There was a sense of moving forward. There was a sense of mutual respect. There was a sense that we had shared interests. But I have seen what's going on in the Chinese economy. We can see what's going on with the shipments to the U.S. And again, we are the deficit country. Historically, the deficit country has a better negotiating position.
Mr. Secretary, part of China's plan over the last several years has been to manufacture far more goods than it can ever consume. it exports that not only to the United States, but to other countries around the world. Other countries like the United States and countries in Europe have felt like they're getting dumped on with all of these excess goods that are being manufactured. Will your talks in other countries find ways to make sure that China can't get around anything you set up in your deals with China by, let's say, shipping goods to Mexico and having that come up, those goods come up through Mexico? How do you shut that down? And did that come up this weekend?
Well, Becky, that's already happening. That's already happening with many goods. You know, it's happening with autos. It's happening with electronics. So that's part of the negotiation with the Mexican government. It's part of our overall strategy. And Chinese have an economic plan called dual circulation. And with dual circulation, our goal is to make sure dual circulation means export and domestic use. Dual circulation cannot mean that China overproduces and that only Chinese goods are consumed in China and then they export the excess to the rest of the world. So we have had the equivalent, because of these high tariff rates, of an embargo on China, and those goods are going to leak to the rest of the world. So, you know, our negotiations, we don't need to tell other countries what they need to do. They are seeing this wave of Chinese goods coming to their shore. They have to find a home, and that could be at a discount price, undercutting local producers.
Exactly. And that ultimately leads to some of these other countries raising tariffs on China, right, due to that, okay? And that's why it was so silly for these people to say, well, the world is going to coalesce around China. And it's like, you don't understand China. You don't understand the China business model and what they're actually trying to do, because they're actually trying to dominate the world. What they want to do is to put all foreign manufacturers out of business, right? And to have basically the world rely on China. And if the world is relying on China for, you know, key goods and things of that nature, right, manufacturing, then if China decides that, you know what, we're going to turn it off, right? Guess what? All of the countries that have decided to shutter their own manufacturing base to rely on China because of the cheap goods, China got them by the balls, right? Effectively, they're at the whims of the Chinese and whatever the Chinese wants. It really is a plan for world domination. That's what it is, right? That's exactly what China's trying to do. They're trying to dominate the world by essentially putting the world's manufacturing out of business, right? That's what they're doing. And that's why I just thought it was silly for these people to come out and say, oh, well, the world is going to coalesce around China. It's like, no, the world has the same problems with China that we do, right? It's just that President Trump is one of the only leaders with the cojones and enough actual economic power to challenge and to stand up in China. So, you know, watching all this kind of unfold is hilarious, because people like me from the beginning, right? I was telling you guys, stay calm, stay cool, don't be out here panicking. Okay, the Trump administration has a plan. They're trying to get China to the table. And that if it wasn't for the mainstream liberal media and Wall Street and the Democrat Party and their treasonous behavior, this trade war would have been over a long time ago. China would have came to the table a long time ago. The only reason that China held out so long is due to the fact that they thought Wall Street and the mainstream liberal media and the Democrat Party, working on behalf of China, right, would essentially pressure Trump to fold, right? That Trump would eventually fold, but that's not what happened. Again, I actually have to congratulate the president for sticking this out as long as he has, because again, most presidents don't have the cojones to even try to take on China like this. Biden certainly did it, right? And the fact that President Trump held out for so long, despite the massive domestic pressure. I mean, all these billionaires calling him up every single day, Tim Cook and all the others, right? He still held out. And we still have the tariffs on China, right? We still have 30% tariffs on China. The fentanyl tariffs, we're still tariffing them. So I don't understand how anybody can come out here and to say with a straight face that this is a fold from President Trump. No, it's not a fold. The tariffs are still there, and we got China to the table. Trump clearly won. This is clearly a W.
Mr. Secretary, I have a question for you, which is the market's obviously very happy about this morning. I think the global economy is quite happy about what you've been able to accomplish over the weekend. The question I would ask is how what you've accomplished over the weekend squares to some extent with some of the things that we've heard over the past couple of months from the administration about what the tariffs ultimately could do to both box out China, put pressure on them to do other things for us, to create meaningful additional revenues in the form of tariffs, and perhaps most importantly, to force manufacturing back to the United States. And so by lowering these tariff rates, to some degree, I'm sure there are critics who would say that it upends some of those goals.
Well, again, Andrew, this is just a pause. The April 2nd tariff level for China was 34%. So we have moved that down from 34 to 10. We still have the 20% fentanyl tariffs that were put on in February. So we just in 2025, we have added 30%. And again, one of the most important things that we're doing, we do not want a generalized decoupling from China, but what we do want is a decoupling for strategic necessities, which we were unable to obtain during COVID, and we realized that efficient supply chains were not resilient supply chains. So we are going to create our own steel, protect our steel industry. They work on critical medicines, on semiconductors. So we are doing that, and the reciprocal tariffs have nothing to do with the specific industry tariffs.
We heard, Mr. Secretary, that some progress was made on fentanyl in that deal, and that's 20% of the tariff that's going to stay. What progress was made, and how do you see that happening over the next 90 days? And do you expect a deal can be reached? And what does it look like? What do you want China to do exactly with fentanyl?
Well, Joe, this is a priority for President Trump and indeed the whole administration. I have a personal stake in this. The two very close friends lost children to this terrible scourge. Hundreds of thousands of Americans die every year. And I think that we saw here in Geneva that the Chinese are now serious about assisting the U.S. in stopping the flow of precursor drugs, because the Chinese brought their trade delegation, led by the vice premier, but they also brought a deputy minister for security who was their fentanyl expert. We brought someone from our national security staff, and they had a very long and in-depth sidebar about how our two countries could work together.
As far as some of the non-tariff related barriers that you talk about making progress on, we just had one of our reporters, Eunice, from Beijing, just sort of talking about how the Chinese view things. They said, yeah, you know, we might talk a good, I'm paraphrasing, we might talk a good game and promise some things, but it's very hard to quantify or to put into writing some of those other issues, whether it's rare metals, even currency manipulation. How would that be affected over the next 90 days? What type of agreement could you reach that has actual teeth for the non-tariff barriers?
Well, Joe, these aren't problems that have sprung up overnight. They sprung up over 40 years. So Ambassador Jameson Greer, USTR, has a book this thick of all the non-tariff barriers, and then also of the state subsidies for labor and for industry. So we've got a playbook. President Trump successfully executed a deal in his first term. I think we can build on that, and that's the purpose of the 90-day pause, to see what we can do and work on these non-tariff barriers, because China actually has low tariffs. It's the insidious non-tariff trade barriers that hurt American companies trying to do business there. And make no mistake, one of the goals here is to open China for American businesses in a fair way. We want American businesses to be able to sell into China, and part of the goal is bringing down these unfair non-tariff trade barriers, and that's what we will be focusing on.
Yeah, so you've seen that, you heard that. I think what is happening right now is a great thing for this country. I like the fact that President Trump decided to take on China. It's not over. Again, the reason why it is temporary, the reason why we're leaving these tariffs in place is because it lets them know, China know, that we're serious. We are serious about enforcing the trade deal, and that we're not going to let you cheat, that we're not going to let you get around the deal, right? We're going to enforce the deal, right? It's really that simple. So again, all of this is about opening up markets. When you open up markets, foreign markets, for our domestic producers, then guess what? That creates jobs. That incentivizes more manufacturing here because they know, okay, well, we can sell overseas. So again, all of this stuff is being done. For the markets, the volatility is not something they prefer. I personally don't care about the volatility because I'm young, right? Volatility is actually a great thing for people like me, okay? Now, for gamblers and people who are close to retirement, not so much, but that's not me, okay? So, hey, the volatility, it benefits, right? That little, 20% drop, depending on what index you was looking at. Hey, I hope you bought the dip, right? I hope you bought the dip. The people who bought the dip, who weren't panicking, who stayed the course, made a lot of money, right? The people who were short selling, who were panicking, okay, selling their retirement and stuff like that, yeah, you lost. Listening to the mainstream liberal media and MSDNC and CNN, and that's the worst part about this. They probably convinced a lot of people who are not that smart to make very bad financial decisions based off their lies. And that's what I try to tell you guys. These people have no shame. They have no shame. They would rather see America lose than for Trump to win. And you're seeing it play out right in front of our faces. So, again, the markets love this. Clearly, the markets think that this is a win for this country, right? Because, again, according to the media, right, the markets tell us everything, right? So, again, look at how the markets are reacting to this. I think personally that this is a W for President Trump. The media is not going to give him a W on it, but I want you guys to understand that we were told that China would never come to the table unless President Trump completely folded, and that didn't happen. China did come to the table, and we're making progress, and it's kind of crazy to root against this country being successful because you hate one man so much. But let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.